Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm glad to see we have a nice group of people, and I'm very happy to be here. So I'm going to be talking, as you gathered from the title, I'm going to be talking about the LSAT, talking about some ideas for preparing for it, what's on it, and that kind of thing. But before I get started, usually in these kinds of talks, I like to tell you a little bit about myself, just so you know who I am, know a little bit about me. So as you just heard, I am the Director of Assessment Development, so at LSAC. So what that means is I'm basically the manager of the department that produces the test, the LSAT. So we write the questions, we put together the tests that test takers see on test day. So that's my job. As far as my background goes, I'm actually Cuban American. So I was born in the United States back in a long time ago. I'm a little bit older than most of you probably. But I was born in the United States, but Spanish was my first language when I was young because I was, with my family, and we had a sort of small community of extended family. Not in Miami, by the way. Most people, if they hear Cuban American, they figure, okay, well, you're from Miami, right? But no, actually, my family was up in Connecticut just because my mother happened to have an aunt who was living there already when the rest of the family left after the revolution in the late 50s. Spanish was my first language. And then English became my dominant language once I started school. And, by the time I got to say second grade or so, I was more comfortable in English than in Spanish. It's my main language now, although I still enjoy speaking and reading in Spanish. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm going to get started now and share my slideshow. Somebody let me know if you don't see that, but I'm assuming that everyone now sees Preparing for Success in Law School, and insiders look at the LSAT. So yes, and I am that insider. I'm the guy who works at the LSAT, and I help produce the test and write the questions and so on. So let's get started. My goal here today is to give you some information about the LSAT that I hope will maybe help you feel a little bit more confident going in on test day, help you feel like you know what to expect and that you're prepared to do your best on test day. Because I know it can be it can be cause anxiety, or it could be a difficult experience. But I think with preparation and with foreknowledge, you really put you in a good position to do well going in on test day. So let's get started. There we go. All right, so what is the LSAT? Whoops. The LSAT is basically, it's an admissions test, obviously, for law school. And the main thing I like to emphasize about the LSAT, and if you remember anything from today, I hope you remember this part, and that's that first bullet there. It's a test of skills. In fact, in particular, it's a test of critical thinking skills. And what we include under that broader category of critical thinking skills is a couple of subsets of skills: high-level reading skills, and then reasoning skills. And both of these groups of skills, if you think about it, you're probably already aware of both of these sets of skills: reading and reading difficult texts, complicated texts, and reasoning about what you read and reasoning about other things that you're learning and doing. Those sets of skills are both very important for success in law school, which is why they're on the test. So basically, we test skills, and these skills are important for success in law school. They're also important for success in lots of other fields, for that matter, reading and reasoning, of course. But definitely, they're very important for success in law school. The results of the LSAT are tested for validity, which means basically that every year the folks at LSAC who do the scoring, they run an analysis, and they find that it does correlate strongly with first-year average in law school, which is why, and it's based on those skills. That's why the correlation is there. And so it is tested for validity every year, and it correlates to first-year performance. And the other thing that I think is really good to know about these skills in particular, and preparing for law school and preparing for the LSAT, is that skills are things that the more you use them, the stronger they get, right? So I always like to use an analogy to sports. Let's say I've played a little bit of tennis in my life, but not a whole lot. I'm not a great tennis player. But if I wanted to get better at the skill of playing tennis, what would I have to do? Well, obviously, I'd have to practice and I'd have to play. And the more I did that, the more time I put into practicing and playing tennis, the stronger my tennis skills would get. Same thing for reading and reasoning. And one lesson to take from that is if for those of you who are not yet, or who are early in your academic career as an undergraduate, if you're in your first year or second year, or even in your third year, one thing that you can do to prepare for the LSAT, yes, but more importantly, prepare for law school, is take classes that challenge you and require you to use those skills, reading and reasoning skills. That can be history, literature, philosophy certainly involves reasoning. It could be economics, pretty much any field. Just make sure that they're classes that require you to use those reading and reasoning skills. And that will strengthen those skills as you go through your undergraduate career, which is good for taking the LSAT, definitely, but more importantly, it prepares you for the career, for the study of law and for a career in law. So that's one of the good things about this, is that preparation, the general preparation, as opposed to familiarizing yourself specifically with the test, which we'll talk about later, but that general preparation of strengthening those skills of reading and reasoning, that's preparation not just for the LSAT, but for the study of law and for legal profession in general. The test, we emphasize fairness and validity. It is accessible. If you have any kind of accessibility needs, you can get what you need from LSAT, and you can contact us for more information. All of the test questions, when we write them, are reviewed by a diverse team of external experts as well as us test developers. So every single question, long before it's scored, is sent out to a committee of reviewers who look at every single question for fairness in terms of whether it, to make sure it doesn't rely on any background knowledge that is inaccessible to certain groups of test takers rather, not test developers, and just generally for fairness to all of our test takers. And one result of all this whole process is that there are no tricks or secrets to answering test questions. You may have heard, it's out there in the world, it's on the internet. You may have heard people saying things like, well, to do well on this test on the LSAT, you have to know certain tricks, or there are traps that you have to avoid, or there are secrets that you know, that you need to know. And a lot of times you'll hear this from prep companies. Not all of them, but some of them will present the test in that way. And that tells you a little bit of something about where that's coming from, because why do they say that about the test? Well, what they're telling you is, yeah, you need to know all these secrets. And if you give us a small fee, we'll teach you what those secrets are. But no, it's in fact the opposite. We go to great lengths to make sure that the test doesn't require anyone to have any secret knowledge or to understand certain tricks or whatever. It really is just a test of thinking, critical thinking, reasoning and reading skills. All right, so let's talk now about what's on the LSAT, and then I'll talk a little bit about the LSAT as it's going on today, right now, in this new world that we're in right now because of COVID-19 and the pandemic and lockdown and everything else and social distancing. And then we'll talk about preparing. So this screen right here, this slide is about the traditional LSAT. This is what existed before we went into lockdown. But I want to give it to you for background, and then you'll see how the current version is a little bit different. And then at some point in the future, we may or may not get back to something like this. We'll see. But the LSAT used to be a 3-hour test. And in those 3 hours, you took 4 scored multiple choice sections. There were 35 minutes each. And those 4 together provided a total of 100 to 102 scored multiple choice questions. There was also one unscored multiple choice section. That's where we tried out new questions and got data on them, how difficult or easy they were, and similar things like that. And there was also an unscored writing sample. Now, the unscored writing sample, back a couple of years ago, when the test was still on paper, that was part of test day. And it was the last thing you did on test day, and you wrote it in pencil, on a piece of paper in the test center while at the end of your testing session. Last year, in the summer of 2019, the test went digital. We were giving it this version here with the 5 sections, 4 scored, 1 not scored. We were giving it on tablets in test centers, so that was the digitized version. And at that point, we separated the writing sample, and the writing sample is now done online from your home at a time of your choosing, and it's still that way now in the flex setting. So that part hasn't changed. You schedule it, at your convenience, anytime you want, 24/7, and you write your essay online, typing, of course, as opposed to handwriting, and that's the way it works now. It's still unscored, but a copy is sent to every law school that you apply to. So it's worth taking seriously because a lot of law schools, the majority of law schools will look at least some of the essays, if not all of them. And the other thing that's important to know about that writing sample, by the way, is that you have to have at least one valid writing sample in your LSAC file. So when you take the test, you'll sign up for an account at LSAC if you haven't done so already. And you have to complete the writing sample at least once and have that on file before your LSAT scores, the scored part, before your score can be reported to law schools that you want to apply to. So when you're getting ready to apply to law school and you want them to see your LSAT scores, you must make sure that you have a writing sample on file. Otherwise, your scores can't be sent. All right, so what's on the multiple choice part of the test? Again, there were 4 scored sections. One of them was reading comprehension. 2 of them, rather, were logical reasoning, and I'll talk a little bit about each of these in a few minutes. And 1 was analytical reasoning. The unscored section was one of those 3. Test takers didn't know which was the unscored section on test day, so you could have gotten 2 reading comprehension, or 3 logical reasoning, or 2 analytical reasoning, and one of those ones with the extra would have been your unscored section. All right, so now in the pandemic, when we're under lockdown, we're doing the LSAT remotely. It's remote proctored through ProctorU, that you might be familiar with them. So you have to sign in, you take the test from your home. Basically, instead of a one-day test like we used to have when we had paper or the digital, which was on tablet, now it's 2 or 3 days, sometimes 4, depending on the number of people. You schedule a time somewhere in that window of a couple days. You sign in. There's a security check. You have to there's a live proctor who looks at your room through the camera. So you need to have your camera on, and your microphone, and all that. You probably have, many of you have probably done something like this already. And then once all that's done, you take the test. It's now 3 sections instead of 5. There's no unscored section temporarily while we're doing this remote thing. No unscored section, and there are only 3 scored sections. So you may remember on the prior screen, it says that there are 2 logical reasoning sections. Now in the pandemic setting, we have 1 logical reasoning section plus still 1 reading comprehension and 1 analytical reasoning, for a total of 3 scored multiple choice sections. So it's about 2 hours long, and there's no break in there, by the way. The writing sample is still scored, and it's still separate, still scheduled at a time of your convenience, 24/7. All right, this is just to give you a look at what it looks like when you are signing up. So you register for the test through lsac.org, like you normally would. And then when you've done that, as the time approaches, like we just had one now in November, you follow a link at lsac.org. It takes you to the ProctorU website, and you sign up for a time like this. Like, for example, this is from back in May. There was Monday, May 18th, and there were times 3:50, 4:30, and so on. So you pick your time like that, and then you're all set to go. By the way, here's something good to know. Now, there are certain requirements that you have to have in order to take the LSAT Flex, because it's from home and because it's remote. Obviously, you need a computer. Your computer has to have a working camera and a working microphone. You need internet service with enough capacity to have a video feed going back and forth. You need a quiet space. There are rules about how you have to be alone in a room. There can't be anybody else in the room. That's, of course, to prevent the possibility that someone might be trying to do something illicit. So you need to have a quiet room to yourself. If any of those things are a challenge, if you don't have the right kind of computer equipment, if you don't have good enough internet service or reliable internet service, if you can't get a room to yourself, contact LSAC. Just go to lsac.org, and you'll find the information there. We can help you out. We can send you a device. We can also arrange for a hotel room for you to have that quiet space, and plus the hotel room will have the Wi-Fi that you need to hook up to the test center and have the video feed and everything. So it's a really good thing to know. All right, so now what I'm going to do now is talk a little bit about each question type, and then again, we'll get to some suggestions for preparing. So the question types are those 3 different types of sections that I talked about: reading comprehension, logical reasoning, and analytical reasoning. I'll talk a little bit about what those look like. and then, I can answer questions about them at the end if you have any particular questions about any of these question types. So reading comprehension, as the name suggests, I told you at the beginning that this is a test of skills, and one of those big sort of groups of skills that we cover is the skill of reading. So reading comprehension is designed to assess your ability to read difficult texts and to read them with understanding and insight. These texts are dense, they can be complex, they can often involve argument, and being able to read that kind of content and to understand it and be able to, have sort of high level comprehension, that's a kind of skill that is definitely very important in law school. So what do? Well, we provide a reading passage. They're about 450 to 500 words long. There are 4 reading selections in the reading comprehension section. Again, the section takes 35 minutes, and that's still true in the Flex setting. The LSAT Flex is the name of the online proctored thing. So in the Flex setting, it's still 35 minutes per section, unless you have an accommodation that grants you extra time, which is a possibility that you can get for certain diagnoses. But in that 35 minutes, you read 4 reading selections. 3 of them are single passages about 450 to 500 words long. One of them is 2 related passages. Together, the 2 of them are about as long as one of the single passages, again, 450 to 500 words. And those 2 passages, roughly 250 words each, they're written by different, or based on sources written by different authors. They have different main points and different purposes, but they are related to each other, and then you'll answer questions about how they relate to each other. For each of those reading selections, whether it's a single passage or the pair of passages, you answer 5 to 8 questions, and then you do that again 4 times per section. The topics, we develop these passages, by the way, from published sources. We don't make them up. We don't write them from scratch. They're adapted from published sources, and they can cover pretty much any topic that has the sort of level of complexity and argumentation that we want on our test. It can cover almost any topic that you can think of, but the topics do fall into 4 categories, and you're going to get one of each of these on each reading comprehension section, each test. 1 humanities, 1 natural science, 1 social science, and 1 law related. Now, we say law related because it is a topic that's connected to the law, which is what you're looking to study, of course. But you haven't been to law school yet, so it doesn't presume that you have the knowledge that you will have once you start law school and once you graduate law school. But it is a topic that's related to the law, but it's written for a general readership, readers who have an undergraduate level of education, so it has some complexity and some sophistication, but it doesn't require knowledge of the law. If I can give you one piece of advice about reading comprehension, it's that last bullet there. It's really important as you read to pay attention to the main point of the passage, and there's a couple reasons for that. One, every passage that we write or that we produce, that we adapt for the test, has a main point. They always have a focus. The author has a point that he or she is trying to establish. And if as you read, you try to identify that main point, try to understand what the author is trying to get across, that's going to help you to understand the passage as a whole better, because everything else in the passage is going to relate to that main point in some way. It's going to support the main point, or the author might, if the author has a main point, let's say one topic that always comes to my mind is if the author wants to argue that the earth is getting warmer and the cause is human activity, like burning of fossil fuels, everything in that passage will either support that claim, or the author might discuss a competing claim or an opposing claim. Like some people believe that whether or not the earth is getting warmer, or if it is getting warmer, it's just a result of natural cycles, not human activity. The author might discuss that point of view in order to disagree with it or criticize it, but it's still, everything relates to that main point. So that's one reason why it's good to pay attention to the main point. It helps you understand the passage as a whole. Secondly, if you've already started looking at some of our tests that you can practice on for preparation purposes, you've probably noticed that almost every single reading comprehension set starts with a main point question, or with something, a variation of that. We might ask about primary purpose, which is a related idea, the primary purpose of the passage. So if you're paying attention to that main point, and the related idea of the primary purpose as you read, you'll be ready for that first question, which again, it's not actually 100%, but well over 90% of our passages start, or the questions afterwards start with a main point or related questions. So that's a great thing to pay attention to as you go through. All right, now let's talk about logical reasoning. So this used to be half of the test when it was the full LSAT on paper or the tablet. Now it's one of 3 sections. And logical reasoning is basically a test of your ability to understand and analyze arguments and evaluate arguments. So what you do is you read a short argumentative passage. Short is typically 20 to 100 words. And then each of these short passages is followed by one question. If you practice on some of our older stuff from 15, 20 years ago, which you might do, you might find some where there's an argument followed by 2 questions, but those are not coming out going forward. That's just on some of our older tests. So you answer one question, and there are about 25, sometimes 26 of these in your logical reasoning section. So that's about 50 on the standard LSAT, 25 on the LSAT Flex. They can cover, again, pretty much any topic. They're mostly developed, the vast majority are developed, again, from published sources. We look for arguments out there in magazines and newspapers, other things on the internet. And it can cover politics, government, medicine, psychology, education, ethics, you name it. Any topic, visual arts, any topic where someone presents an argument, and if that argument fits our needs, we can adapt it for use on the LSAT. And by argument, by the way, argument in this context is argument in the logical sense, not 2 angry dudes on Fox News yelling at each other. Argument in this context means a set of statements that are meant to establish a conclusion. Okay, so you don't need to take logic to do well on logical reasoning or on the test as a whole, but we do presume the LSAT presumes that you're familiar with certain key terms that are really important in analyzing and evaluating arguments. And those are in that last bullet there. So make sure you're familiar with these going in on test day on the LSAT. If you're not already familiar with all of them, you can do various things. A lot of universities will have introduction to logic or introduction to critical thinking classes. That's a great place to get familiar with those terms and also with the whole sort of approach to analyzing arguments. You can get yourself a book on critical thinking or introduction to logic that will go over these terms. And you can also visit khanacademy.com where they explain these terms. And I'm going to talk more about Khan Academy later on. But those terms these are very important. Again, argument, inference, assumption, conclusion, and premise. And I'll give you a sort of quick summary of what they all are. So an argument is a set of statements that are called premises, and the premises together support another statement that's called a conclusion. Okay, that process of drawing the conclusion from the premises, that's inference. That's called the process of inference. And sometimes the conclusion itself is called an inference. And finally, an assumption is what we call a premise that's not explicitly stated. That's a very common thing that's done in arguments. I always like to use an example from my own life. My family and I used to have a very nice dog, a very wonderful dog named Kipper. Kipper has gone on now to the afterlife. But here's a brief argument about Kipper. Kipper is a dog, therefore Kipper is a mammal. So the premise is Kipper is a dog. You probably recognize the conclusion because I use the word therefore. A lot of times conclusions will be signaled by words like therefore or thus. But if you'll notice, you can't conclude that Kipper is a mammal just from that one premise that Kipper is a dog unless you add another premise, which we all just added naturally and automatically when we hear arguments like that, and that is all dogs are mammals. So that's an example of an assumption. It's a premise that's not stated explicitly. All right, so let's talk a little bit about analytical reasoning. Analytical reasoning is popularly known as logic games or logic puzzles. We call it analytical reasoning. That's the official name, but so you may have heard it discussed under those other names. Analytical reasoning questions test your or assess your ability to understand a structure of relationships and draw conclusions about that structure. What does that mean in practice? Well, you're going to read a short passage up to about 130 words, and that passage is going to describe a scenario, and that in addition to the scenario, it has a set of rules, typically 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5 rules that apply to that scenario. The scenarios involve various kinds of relationships. They can be above or next to spatial relationships. They can be ordering relationships before and after. They can be group membership, like people being assigned to different committees or being put on teams. And based on that scenario and the rules, you're going to be drawing conclusions about what, and as those rules are applied to the scenario, you're going to draw conclusions about what the rules allow, what they require, and what they forbid or prohibit. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a little, if you haven't started practicing yet, it's a little bit hard to sort of envision what this means. So definitely before test day, you do want to familiarize yourself with the test in general. It's very helpful to familiarize yourself with the LSAT beforehand. And in particular, if you haven't seen this kind of thing before, analytical reasoning, it really is helpful to you to be familiar with it when you go in on test day. So we'll talk briefly about the writing sample. Again, this is the part that is now separate. You schedule it at a time of your choosing, your convenience, 24/7. But again, make sure you have it done before you want your law schools that you're applying to receive your scores. Actually, you want to give it like a couple of weeks because there's some processing time in there. But the way it works is you're given a prompt that describes, again, a scenario. In this scenario, there is a person or an organization that's making a choice between two options. They have to choose one or the other. They can't do both. They're mutually exclusive. And then you're given a couple of criteria that they need to satisfy if in choosing one option or the other. And then you're given a set of facts that apply to the situation and sort of help you sort of fill in how they might satisfy those criteria by choosing option A or option B. Your job then is to write persuasive essay arguing for choosing one of the two options. It doesn't matter which one, they're pretty well balanced. Either one is equally good, and you can write a good argument for either one. What law schools are looking for basically is, can you write clearly? Do you understand, or can you write good standard English? And can you put together a clear argument, a persuasive essay in favor of an option or other, one option or another? And again, they're not scored. We do not score these, but we do send a copy to each law school that you apply to. All right, time's getting a little tight. I'm gonna skip that. I just had some of the features of the interface. So now let's talk a little bit for the remaining 15 minutes about preparing for the LSAT. Now, as I mentioned, it really is in your interest to familiarize yourself with the test before test day. Now, in terms of developing your skills, like I said, that's a sort of long-term project. You want to use your reading and reasoning skills as much as you can in your coursework and also in your life. And that will help you not only on the LSAT, but in law school in general. But there's no magic number. There's no specific time when you have to start before whenever you think you're going to take the test or whenever you're planning to take the test. But probably at least a couple months in advance, you want to start familiarizing yourself with the specific content of the test itself. And a great tool for doing that is right here, Khan Academy. Most of you are probably familiar with the Khan Academy already, but you may not know that they have an LSAT preparation page, not a page, a whole LSAT preparation tool on their website. It's a great tool. It's official LSAT prep, it's called that because we worked with them. So we commissioned them to put together this free LSAT prep website. We guided them on helping them to sort of understand how our questions work and how to explain our questions. And they put together this fabulous preparation website. It's the only official LSAT prep out there other than our own books and products. But there are, I'm sure you know, there are test prep companies that you can take prep courses from for a fee, but those are not official LSAT prep. A lot of them would license our questions, and they do use official LSAT questions. But this is the only LSAT, official LSAT prep that where we worked with the company that puts the prep out there. So I definitely recommend at least a couple months before you take your test, go to khanacademy.org/LSAT, or you can just Google Khan Academy LSAT prep and it'll take you right there. You'll sign up for a Khan account if you don't already have one. If you have one, you'll just use your existing account. And it's a great thing. It's completely free, absolutely free. There is no charge, and there will never be a charge for using Khan Academy's LSAT prep site. And when you start there, if you haven't gone already, the first thing you'll do is you'll take a diagnostic test. It can be either a complete LSAT, or there are also shorter diagnostics that you can take. They'll ask you when you plan to take the LSAT. They'll ask you what your target score is, what score you'd like to get, and then based on those three pieces of information, your diagnostic, your planned test date, and your target score, they'll put together a nice preparation program for you with different steps and schedule different steps at different times for you. So it's really helpful, and it sort of guides you through the process. It has scheduling tools. They have actual LSATs. They have over 40 now complete LSATs, including some that have never been published. They have explanatory videos, which are really great to watch and learn from, and they have written explanations. And there's a couple of things to know too about this. One is that, as I said, skill building is something that you do over a long, you'll be doing over your undergraduate career, especially these skills, reading and reasoning. But preparing for the LSAT, especially with a great tool like this one, actually itself helps you build those skills, reading and reasoning. And there's actually evidence of that out there. So it's strengthening those skills because you'll be using them in an intensive way when you're preparing for the test. Also, we have some data that Khan has shared with us, and the data shows that this is more, sort of evidence of the value of preparing. People who use the Khan site, the more practice tests they take, and that's part of the preparation program that they'll design for you, is periodically they'll have you take a full practice test using an actual, previously used and previously scored LSAT. The more tests people take, the better they do on average on the LSAT, up to 10 or so tests. That's the most I think that they ask about. So the more times you do that, on average, the better people do, the more times they take practice tests on Khan Academy. So it's really a great thing to do, and it's very helpful. Now, another preparation option is we have lots of books that you can buy. Some people just prefer to practice on paper and prepare on paper, which is fine. That works very well. We sell all of our previously used and scored, almost all of our previously used and scored LSATs. You can buy them individually in those books that are called Prep Test, the second and third rows that you see there. Newer ones are sold individually. They're about $10 a piece. You can get them on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. And then after they've been out for a while, 10 of them are put together into bundles of 10 called things like the next 10 actual LSATs. And those sell for about $25 or $30. So they're cheaper per test. Another great thing to know about is the top two books that you see there, upper left, LSAT Super Prep, the official LSAT Super Prep 2. Those are both really great preparation tools because each one of those books has 3 full tests in it. And for each of those 3 tests, so that's like 300 questions altogether, 100 questions per test, because these are tests from the older model, the standard LSAT, 4 sections. For each of those tests, for all 100 questions, we wrote explanations. We, LSAC, my colleagues and I, wrote explanations for why the right answer is right and why the wrong answers are wrong. So those explanations are a great way to sort of get more insight into how our questions work and how to approach them and how to answer them, because we explain them for you, what makes the right answer the best answer and what makes the 4 incorrect answers not as good an answer. So these are great ways to prepare as well. We also have a new option that we've just offered starting earlier this year. It's called Law Hub. So basically, a lot of the same tests, or pretty much all the same tests that you can purchase in books, you can get on Law Hub for the subscription fee. So there are two versions. You can go to lsac.org, that's our website, and sign up for an account if you don't already have one. Once you have an account, you can get the free version of Law Hub, which basically has two official LSATs, and they're in the format that you'll see on test day if you take the LSAT Flex, the remote proctored one that you take from home. Also, if you had taken it, the digital LSAT on tablets, it's that same interface. It looks exactly the same. It works the same. Or for an annual subscription fee of $99, you can purchase the full library, access to the full library of preparation tests, so that it's about 60, now it's actually approaching 70 practice tests that are available with this with the subscription. By the way, if you apply for and receive a fee waiver, this subscription is included for free. So if paying for the LSAT and the associated fees might be a hardship for you, go to lsac.org and you'll find information about applying for a fee waiver. Again, you can also just Google LSAT fee waiver, and this subscription is included with your fee if you get a fee waiver. On Law Hub, this is what it looks like when you start. So you have two ways to practice. You can see there it says choose mode, and you have self-paced mode or exam mode. If you do exam mode, it's just like exam day. You have 35 minutes per section, and then it shuts down. The section ends. If you choose self-paced mode, you can change the number of minutes. That's in that box a little bit lower down there. Right now it says 35 minutes per section, but you can change that number to a larger number of minutes, anything up to 480 minutes per section, which is actually 8 hours. So that's plenty of time. You probably won't need that much time, but you've got that option. And that's what I recommend, by the way, at the start. In other words, don't jump right in and start taking these sections that are under time constraints, especially if you're just starting to familiarize yourself with the test, just starting to prepare and to practice. Give yourself more time and work slowly and just familiarize yourself with the questions that way. This is what it looks like. This is the Law Hub interface. If you go to our website, this is, by the way, an analytical reasoning one question, the first question in the analytical reasoning section. So this gives you an example of what they look like. So you got a movie studio scheduling 6 films to be released. Here's their names, and then there are the rules that apply to that release, ordering the release of those films. And then here's an example of a question. So given those rules as they apply to the scenario, what cannot be true? And actually, I don't know if that's the correct answer, but this image, somebody picked B. So on test day, it will look just like this, except it'll just be that white box. You won't have that library and tutorials blue bar on the left there. But otherwise, this is just like what you'll see on test day. You select answers by just clicking on the bubble. You can also mark answers as incorrect by clicking on the oval with the line through it on the right there, to the right of the options. You can highlight, you can underline. Those options are available at the top there. You can change font size. You can change the brightness of the screen. You can, the time remaining is, obviously the countdown clock for the section. You can hide that for most of the time of the section. So for the first 30 minutes, that you can hide that if you want to. If you don't want to be looking at the clock while you're working, you can leave it up, of course, if you want. If you hide it, when 5 minutes are left, there's a warning, a box that pops up that says there are 5 minutes left, and then the clock stays on the screen. You can no longer hide it. And then down here at the bottom, it shows you all the questions that are in the section. If you've answered a question here, only number 1 is answered, that's filled in. This little black line tells you what question you're currently looking at. And there's also a flag for review feature. So if you're not sure of an answer and you leave it blank, or if you answer it and want to look at it at the end if you have more time, you can flag it and go back to review it later. All right, so last thing I'm going to go over is, again, I mentioned that Khan Academy is a great preparation method, absolutely free, and it's sort of a guided process where they set up a schedule for you and tell you, let's practice some reading comprehension questions tomorrow, Saturday. On Sunday, let's take a practice test, and so on. And similarly, if you take a commercial prep course where you're paying for someone's expertise and someone to help you prepare, they're also going to give you a program and tell you what to do. But you can also do it on your own without Khan and without taking a course. And you can do this either with the Law Hub option if you buy the subscription, or you can do it with books or both. And so here's our suggested self-prep method if you want to do it on your own. If you're at the very beginning, if you haven't started familiarizing yourself with tests at all, what I suggest is take 1 or 2 full tests, and the full tests that you're going to get in the books or on Law Hub are going to be the standard 4-section LSAT. But that's still a good practice, even though in effect there's an extra section for you. Take 1 or 2 full tests. Don't time yourself. Just take the time you need to finish. And that will help you just to start to get used to the question types, to see how they work. It will help you identify strengths, or if there's a particular type of section that you find more challenging than the others. For a lot of people, that's the analytical reasoning, but not everyone. Some people find the reading more challenging, for example, or some people logical reasoning, of course. So one of the ways that you'll know if you find a section more difficult is if one of the section types takes you longer to finish than the other ones. If you're just giving yourself as much time as you need, if one of them takes you longer, that's a sign. Or if you've given yourself all the time you need to answer the questions and you get more questions wrong in a particular type of section, that's a sign that that question type or that section type is going to be more challenging for you. So then what you want to do is continue to take sections, not timed, individual sections, do more of them. If there is one type that you find more difficult, do more of those. Do all 3 to continue to familiarize yourself with the sections and the question types. If you get any questions wrong when you're preparing, always go back and review that question very carefully and see if you can figure out, or make sure you can figure out, why your answer wasn't the best answer and why the answer that's the credited response, the one that's marked as the right answer, why that is the best answer. Review any question you got wrong. That's a great way to really help you come to understand how our questions work and how to answer them, how to approach them. Those 2 books I mentioned, by the way, Super Prep 1 and 2, are a great resource for that process, because again, every single question is explained for you in those books. Khan Academy is also great because they have a lot of explanations too on a lot of the questions. Then what I recommend, after you've done that for a while and you feel like you maybe are ready to try out the timed version, I would try just doing single sections under time, about 35 minutes per section. If you have an accommodation where you get extra time, then do whatever that time is. And you can do this on paper with a timer, or you can do it in Law Hub where you the time in exam mode is set to 35 minutes, or if you have an accommodation, you can put it on the other mode, the name of it's slipping in my mind right now, and set it to the time that you're going to be receiving. Do that for individual sections. Again, maybe do more of them if you find more sections of the type that you find challenging, if there is one. Always keep reviewing any question you got wrong. Same thing applies once you start taking timed sections. After you've done that for a while and you're feeling good, take 2 sections at a time, timed, and then build up to 3 sections at a time, timed. The advice used to be to build up to 4 for the 4 scored sections, but now that we're in the LSAT flex mode, I would stop at 3 sections because that's what you'll have on test day. And take them under simulate test day, take them up to 3 sections timed, and then do that as often as you can. Remember, as I said, the data from Khan Academy suggests the more actual practice tests people take, the better they do on average. Ultimately, the goal is you want to simulate the real thing that you're going to experience on test day. Having that familiarity, having gone through it, knowing what to expect is going to really help you on test day to feel confident and relaxed, and you feel like you know what you're going to be expecting. Law Hub is a great tool for this, Khan Academy, and of course our books. So do that as many times as you can fit into your schedule to work out your optimal pace. You'll work out a sense for when to stick with a hard question or when to move on. You'll build that mental stamina for taking 3 sections in a row at 35 minutes each or more if you have an accommodation. And ultimately, the goal is to go into test day again feeling confident, feeling like you know what to expect and you know what you're going to need to do. And that is it for my slides. And so if there are questions now, I'll be happy to take questions and answer as many questions as I can. So I think, Evangeline, you were gonna, I'm sorry, Tammy, you were gonna,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Awesome. So I'm just going to go ahead and go into, so if you guys had questions, this is inside of the session Q&A. If you guys want to vote on the questions, I will go more towards the ones that have the most votes because there's a lot of questions in here. So let's go ahead and start with, what is your advice on improving reading comprehension scores?
Okay, so that's a great question. Reading comprehension, again, the reading that you do is challenging, it's complex. So my advice for that, it depends on where you are in your undergraduate career and when you're thinking of applying to law school. So as I mentioned, if you're earlier in your career, if you're say a freshman or a sophomore, the great thing to do is to take courses that really force you to read a lot and to read difficult material. It's, like I said, a skill, and reading is a skill. Reading comprehension is a skill. A skill is improved by using it and by challenging it. So that's a great thing to do if you're, again, if law school is still a couple years off, if the LSAT is a couple years off. If though, if you're a junior or a senior and you're applying, so at this point you might be applying for fall of 2021. I think there's still several months between now and certainly when you'll be, or a couple months before, between now and when you'll be applying, depending on law school and probably when you'll be taking the LSAT. Then that's where that advice that I was mentioning before of taking, when you practice, take more reading comprehension sections. The more you practice it, even in the short term, the more comfortable you'll become with it and the more you'll get a sense for how our passages work and how our questions work. And that other piece of advice I gave you back when we were, when I had the slide about reading comprehension, namely, as you read, pay attention to the main point. That's a very important one because, again, that's the sort of key to understanding the passage. If you understand the main point of the passage, and then all the rest of it sort of falls into place around that passage, around that main point, rather. So that's the best advice I think I can give you for improving reading comprehension.
Great. And then let me see here. Some people are not good at standardized tests, and LSAC has been sued for discriminating because of comedy. Let me see here. I'm gonna skip this one until I read it through. Give me 1 second. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So yeah. What is your, no, well, I'm sorry about this. This has many. Okay, I just took the November LSAT Flex and I experienced significant technical difficulties throughout the entire day. I wasn't able to complete my test due to tech issues through LSAC device and Proctor U. What do you tend to do to rectify these issues, like since?
So yeah, some people do experience technical difficulties when they take the LSAT through the Flex. Typically that's due to the individual's computer or internet access, the internet service. Now, whatever the source of the issue, if it was that or if it was maybe the Proctor U or whatever, what I recommend that you do, if you haven't already, is call lsac.org or go to the website and we can schedule a retest for you since you weren't able to complete the test. In terms of I think the question was what can we do to improve that situation? Again, if for people who, if the technological requirements are a challenge, if you don't have internet access that you need, or if you don't have the computer technology that you need, or the quiet space or whatever, contact LSAC and we can also help you out with that. And we'll be happy to help you with that.
Perfect. I think you answered this one, but is there a particular prep course that you recommend?
Well, I recommend the Khan Academy, which is the one, again, it's the official LSAT prep and it's free. We don't, so the commercial prep companies, the ones that charge for a prep course, the reputable ones license questions from us. So that's one thing that you can ask them is, do you use real LSAT questions in your prep course? If they don't, that means if they haven't licensed our questions, that means that they're making them up, they're writing their own, and that's not going to be as good for preparing. Beyond that, I don't give any recommend, or we don't give any recommendations on particular prep courses to use other than Khan Academy.
Great. And then do we see a future in which we return to paper tests?
That's a good question. At this point, there's so much uncertainty with the future of the pandemic. We actually recently got some potentially very good news because it looks like there might be some vaccines that are promising that, might be distributed before too long, but we just don't know. So once we are able to offer tests in test centers again, I probably don't envision us going back to paper, but we might do some other sort of technological, approach using computers in a test center. It'd be something like that, although that all remains to be worked out. And again, the future right now is still very much uncertain.
Great. Let's see here. I've seen so many recommendations on how to prepare for LSAT, but are there official recommendations on study material?
So there, for study material, if you mean by that, like, resources that you can use, prep courses and so on. So the only recommendations we as an organization have are, again, the Khan Academy. We definitely recommend that, and also our own books. So we're not responsible for the content, either books that other people publish or the content of their courses. We don't work with them, and they're responsible for their own courses. If you're interested in buying books other than ours, or if you're interested in taking a course other than the Khan Academy, what I recommend is asking around, maybe talk to people who are currently in law school if they use the course, and see if you can get recommendations that way, or also look on the internet.
Great. Is it, let's see here. Where is it? Is it true that you need at least 6 to 8 months to study for the LSAT? If so, why?
So people say things like that. I think I mentioned earlier, there is no sort of official time or magic number that you need to study for the LSAT. Some people benefit from more preparation than others. Again, this is a test of skills. So if your reading skills, or often for a lot of people, it's reasoning skills, if those aren't, at the level where you get the score that you'd like to get on the LSAT, maybe, preparation can help you with that. And so, but basically, our recommendation is not to say do 3 months or 6 months, or there's no specific number. It's more like practice and prepare until you feel confident and comfortable, and you can go in on test day feeling like you know what to expect, and you feel like you will perform to your best ability.
Great. Does LSAT Hub give you an explanation of the wrong versus right answers, much like the books?
So the Law Hub is, if you, the subscription version has the content of Super Prep 2 on it. Not, I believe Super Prep 1, there's a plan to get it up there, but it's not up there yet. But you can get those explanations from Super Prep 2. Also, Khan Academy has explanations that they've developed, and they offer either in video form or in text form.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Will there be an official flex score chart on the LSAT website?
So there is a practice test, 3-section test that was used in the Flex back in May, and those scores are available. So that'll be there, but it's complicated because there's not one chart for all of Flex. It does vary depending on which sections someone happens to get. So there's not like one standard conversion table.
Perfect. Let me see here. I'm a sophomore in college and I'm deciding how I should go about studying for the LSAT. Which of these options would you recommend I pursue? One, do some preliminary study on my own for 3 to 4 months and enroll in a prep course for 6 months, or enroll in a prep course for 3 to 4 months and find my weakness and then self-study for 6 months.
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I think both of those sound like good options if you are thinking of taking a prep course. I don't see that either one is going to be better than the other. So in both cases, you're going to do some self-study for several months and you're going to take a course. I think that either one will work.
Perfect. And then what are your thoughts on the racial disparity of LSAT scores and possible solution LSAC can assist with with these statistics?
Sure. So that's a really interesting, a really good question, and a very a very important question. So one thing that I mentioned early in my slides is that LSAC, we strive to make the test as fair as possible. Every question that we write is reviewed by outside experts who belong to various subgroups of our test-taking population. Basically the subgroups of people of color, also some other. We make sure that there's gender representation and so on. So we look for any possible sources of unfairness that way. We're also, all of us who work on the test are thoroughly trained on possible sources of unfairness or bias. So the differences in scores between different groups, I think, is related to a difficult and complicated history that we have in the United States, so that I think it's reflective of a larger social issue in terms of racial and ethnic groups and social economic status. So we put all the efforts that we can into making the test as fair as possible. As I just described, we're always looking for possible sources of unfairness or bias, and we think that we're very successful in eliminating those from the test. And we also, another very important initiative that we launched to try and address this, especially in terms of socioeconomic status and the charge that a lot of people made that preparing for the LSAT costs a lot of money if you have to pay for a prep course. That was a lot of the reason that we went with Khan Academy and put out the free Khan Academy preparation platform as a way to address that socioeconomic status, a financial issue for preparing for the LSAT.
Great. And then I plan to take taking the last test in July. Will it still be in the Flex version?
In July of 2021. So at this point, we have plans, definite plans, and we've announced that the test will be a Flex test through the test in April of 2021. Beyond that, we're evaluating what's happening with the pandemic and what else might be going on, and we don't know yet, just because there's so much uncertainty. So we only have definite announced plans through April of 2021.
Great. Let's see here. With law schools now taking GREs and LSATs, is there any advantage to one or the other?
It's a good question. So I'm not sure if I can address any advantages to the GRE. The LSAT has certain advantages. So it's one, it's the test that's accepted by all the ABA accredited law schools in the United States and also several law schools in Canada. The GRE is not accepted by all law schools. So if you're not sure where you want to apply, you may limit yourself if you take the GRE instead of limit yourself in terms of which law schools you can apply to if you take the GRE instead of the LSAT. Also, the LSAT, as I was describing earlier, is a test that's designed to specifically test the skills that are important for success in law school. The GRE does have what they refer to as a verbal reasoning section. It involves some reasoning and some reading, but it also has a quantitative, I think they call it a quantitative reasoning section, which is basically algebra and geometry. So you can evaluate for yourself whether you think that is relevant to your skills and your preparation for law school.
Great. And then I want to take the February LSAT. I was wondering if spots usually fill up by the deadline, or due to the LSAT Flex format, will there be more spots available?
I'm not sure if I understand. So there's no cap on the number of registrations for any given administration, and typically February is not one of the larger administrations, so you should be able to register with no problem. If you mean when the Flex is given over a couple days, there is a limit on how many slots the system can accommodate, how many people the system can accommodate in a given day. So if you don't register for one of those slots early, and you have a preference for a day or a time, you might not get your first preference. But we do make sure there's enough capacity for everyone who has actually registered for, in this case, the February LSAT Flex.
Great. And then yes, so we did answer that one, Sophia. And then so this will be the last one. What study methods do you suggest in addition to general test prep, i.e. flashcards, drills, etc.?
So I know some people like to use flashcards. I don't have too much to, I mean, I understand that people do find them helpful, but I don't have a lot of experience with that or ability to sort of offer particular advice on that. I do think that drills can be helpful depending on what you mean by drills. So, you know, like one version of a drill, I was telling you that, you know, you want to take, one of the things that I recommend is taking sections under time constraints as you get closer to test day and get used to that speed and that pacing. You can also do that in a smaller scale. So if you take, say, reading comprehension, 27 questions in 35 minutes, you can do that math, 27 divided by 35. And then you can take whatever that fraction is, which I don't know off the top of my head, you can multiply that by the number of questions in any given set and set the clock for that amount of time. That could be like a drill. So it'd be smaller than a whole section, but still doing it under time constraints. That can definitely be useful. Basically, just taking test questions either individually or in entire sections or entire tests is the way to familiarize yourself and prepare for our test.
Awesome. So thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today. And if any of your questions was not answered, we will ask our speaker to go through it later on throughout the conference and answer it in the session Q&A area. So thank you so much for just your session and just answering all the questions. There were so many of them. So we really appreciate your time. Thank you everyone else, and we will see you at the next session. And great. Awesome.
Thank you, everybody.